Hello everyone, and welcome to my General Hospital official channel. I hope everyone is having a wonderful day. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up.
The dry, unforgiving heat of the Australian outback shimmered in waves above the rust-red earth. Inside the modest, weather-beaten station homestead that served as the unofficial headquarters for the search, the air was thick with a different kind of intensity, a volatile cocktail of fear, exhaustion, and simmering accusation. The frantic energy that had characterized the first 48 hours of the search for Alexis had curdled into a grim, determined stagnation. Every lead had evaporated, every drone sweep of the vast, empty land had yielded nothing but the same ancient, indifferent landscape. It was in this pressure cooker of despair that the fragile alliance between Willow and Michael finally shattered. Willow, her face pale and etched with a grief so profound it seemed to have physically hollowed her out, stood by the large, smudged window, her back to the room. She wasn't seeing the stark beauty of the gum trees or the distant purple haze of the mountains, she was seeing only the phantom image of her sister, scared and alone somewhere in that immense, pitiless expanse. Michael, for his part, was a portrait of controlled, pragmatic fury. Maps were spread across the large wooden table, marked with a frantic, overlapping web of red circles and crossed-out routes. His phone was a permanent extension of his hand, his voice a low, constant rumble of commands and frustrated questions directed at the teams of private investigators, local trackers, and even the reluctantly cooperative local police. The breaking point came when Michael slammed his phone down with a force that made the coffee cups rattle. "They're calling it off," he snarled, his voice cracking with a rare display of raw emotion. "The official search. They're citing resources, weather patterns, bureaucratic cowardice. They think it's a recovery mission now." A sharp, involuntary gasp escaped Willow. She turned from the window, her eyes, usually so soft and trusting, now blazing with an accusatory fire. "And whose fault is that, Michael? Whose brilliant, manipulative plan got her into this mess in the first place?" The room went silent, save for the incessant, maddening buzz of a fly against the windowpane. The two other searchers in the room, a grizzled local tracker named Jack and a young, earnest volunteer, suddenly found the floorboards intensely interesting. Michael's jaw tightened. "We've been over this, Willow. It was a calculated risk to expose her. To get her away from us, for good." "A calculated risk?" Willow's voice was a low, dangerous whisper that was far more terrifying than any shout. "You calculated, did you? Did your calculations include her running blindly into one of the most hostile environments on the planet? Did they factor in the snakes, the dehydration, the sheer, utter disorientation? You set a trap, Michael. You backed a cornered animal into a desert, and you're shocked that it ran. It was a setup to catch a criminal, not a personal vendetta." Michael shot back, his own composure fraying at the edges. He stood up, his imposing frame dominating the small room. "She was a threat to you, to our family, to everything we've built. She needed to be neutralized. I did what needed to be done." "Neutralized?" Willow echoed, the word tasting like ash in her mouth. "Is that what you call it? You used me. You used my fear, my trauma, and you weaponized it. You presented me with this solution, knowing I was so desperate for safety, for peace, that I would agree to anything. You didn't want my opinion, Michael. You wanted my compliance. You wanted a rubber stamp on your own ruthless quest for vengeance." She took a step towards him, her small hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. "You told me it was about gathering evidence. That we would have her arrested at the gallery, that it would be clean, public, and most importantly, safe. You never said a word about confronting her at the old mining site. You never mentioned driving her out into the bloody outback." Michael's eyes flashed. The situation evolved. She was smarter than we anticipated. She had an exit strategy. The mine site was a contingency. A contingency that you failed to share with me." Willow's voice finally broke, rising in pitch and volume. "Because you knew I would never have agreed to it. You knew I would have been horrified at the danger you were putting her in. You don't get to make those unilateral decisions, Michael. Not with my life, and not with hers. This isn't one of your corporate takeovers where you can just crush the opposition and absorb the assets. This is my sister. Flawed, toxic, dangerous, yes. But my flesh and blood. And now she's out there, probably dead, and her blood is on your hands as much as it is on hers. The accusation hung in the air, toxic and suffocating. Michael looked as if he'd been physically struck. He had operated for so long in a world where ends justified means, where threats were quantified and eliminated with cold precision, that Willow's raw, emotional, and fundamentally moral condemnation was a language he struggled to comprehend. Everything I do, he said, his voice dropping to a strained, gravelly tone, is to protect what is mine. To protect you. By becoming the very thing you claim to be protecting me from? Willow shot back, tears now streaming freely down her cheeks, carving paths through the dust. You manipulated the situation, you manipulated me, and you created a chain of events that led directly to this nightmare. You set this up, Michael. All of it. And if we find her body out there, I will never, ever be able to look at you again without seeing the architect of her grave. She turned and fled the room, the screen door slamming shut behind her with a finality that echoed through the silent homestead. Michael stood rigid, her words, "You set this up," echoing in the cavernous spaces of his own mind. For the first time, the unwavering certainty of his actions was replaced by a cold, creeping dread. He had seen himself as the hero, the protector, the master strategist. Through Willow's eyes, he was suddenly, terrifyingly, the villain of the piece. While the human drama of blame and regret unfolded in the homestead, another, more primal search was underway 100 kilometers to the west, in a landscape that seemed ripped from the dawn of time. The air here was different, hotter, drier, filled with the scent of dust, eucalyptus, and the faint, metallic tang of ancient rock. This was the domain of Outback, a German shepherd whose world had, until recently, been defined by the familiar comforts of home, the scent of his master, Willow, the feel of his plush bed, the predictable rhythm of walks and meals. That world had been violently upended days ago. The frantic car ride, the tension thrumming through Willow's body as she held him, the strange, unsettling smells of this new place, it had all put him on high alert. His primary human was in distress, and his every instinct was tuned to her frequency of anxiety. But then came the new command, the one infused with a unique and desperate urgency. He had been presented with an article of clothing, a scarf that belonged to Alexis. The scent was familiar, a thread in the tapestry of his life, but one associated with tension, with sharp voices, with a chemical sharpness of perfume that often masked an underlying note of something else, something agitated and unpredictable. Find Outback. Find Alexis. He understood the command. It was a game he knew well, though never in a context so charged with panic. The initial search at the mine site had been a chaotic symphony of confusing smells, gasoline, burnt rubber, the lingering fear sweat of multiple humans, the alien scents of lizards and wallabies. But he had lopped onto the primary scent, Alexis, and followed it away from the chaos, into the vast, open silence of the bush. For 2 days, the trail had been a ghost, a fleeting whisper on the wind. The arid climate and relentless sun were his enemies, baking the scent molecules from the air and the earth. He would lose it for hours, circling in growing frustration, a low whine building in his throat, only to catch a faint, tantalizing trace that would send him loping off in a new direction, his human handlers struggling to keep up in their rugged vehicle. He wasn't tracking a clear path, he was chasing echoes, following a scent that was being scattered and dissolved by the very elements. His world was a universe of smell. The clean, dry scent of Spinifex grass. The pungent, herbal aroma of the gum trees. The musky, territorial marking of a kangaroo. The sharp, alarming scent of a snake, which made the fur on his back bristle. And through it all, like a single, frayed thread in a vast tapestry, was the scent of Alexis. It was a story told in odors, the initial burst of fear and adrenaline, the lingering perfume, the scent of her sweat as she trudged on, and underneath it all, the unique, personal signature of her skin, her hair, her essence. He led the search party on a meandering, seemingly illogical route. He would double back, circle rock formations, and sometimes just stand, nose quivering, sampling the air currents for that one, crucial thread. The humans grew impatient, he could hear it in their voices, see it in their slumped postures. They relied on sight, on logic, on maps. He relied on a sense they could barely conceive of. They saw a barren wasteland. He saw a landscape teeming with olfactory information, a library written in molecules. On the third day, the nature of the scent began to change. The fear was still there, but it was now laced with something else, the sour, metabolic tang of severe dehydration. The scent of sweat was stronger, but stale, and there was a new, coppery note that his instincts recognized as blood, likely from feet torn by rough ground and ill-fitting shoes. The trail was getting hotter, not in temperature, but in concentration. The echoes were becoming a chorus. He pushed forward with renewed vigor, his pace quickening, his tail held stiff and high. The desperate hope in the voices of the humans following him was a palpable force, feeding his own determination. Then, the trail led him to the river. Or what was once a river. Now it was a wide, sandy gulch, dotted with stagnant, muddy waterholes. The scent plunged down the bank and disappeared at the water's edge. Outback paced back and forth, whining in frustration. The water, even stagnant, acted as a scent barrier. He scrambled down the bank, his paws sinking into the soft sand, and sniffed furiously along the periphery. He picked up the trail again 100 meters downstream, where she had evidently emerged. But the break had cost them precious hours. The scent now led away from the riverbed and towards a line of low, rocky hills. It was fainter here, competing with the overwhelming, dusty smell of stone and the dry, papery scent of dead leaves. The sun was beginning its descent, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, and with the approaching twilight came a drop in temperature that would further complicate the scent picture. Outback, however, was relentless. The trail was now a part of him, an imperative that overrode his own thirst and fatigue. He was close. He could feel it in the very density of the air, in the way the scent molecules were no longer scattered traces but a coherent, if faint, path. He scrambled up a rocky incline, his claws scraping against the stone. At the top, he paused, his body silhouetted against the dying light. The wind shifted, blowing directly into his face from a small, shadowy depression in the hillside ahead. And there it was. The scent. Not a trace, not an echo, but a direct, concentrated stream. It was the smell of Alexis, but now overwhelmingly dominated by the metallic scent of dried blood, the cloying, sickly sweet smell of infection, and the profound, chilling odor of a body shutting down. He let out a single, sharp bark, not the frantic barking of the chase, but a deep, declarative sound that cut through the evening silence. It was a signal. I have found it. He didn't wait for the humans. He plunged down the other side of the ridge, towards the source of the smell, towards the dark, narrow entrance of what appeared to be a small, natural cave, or more accurately, a shallow sandstone overhang that formed a crude, rocky cellar dug into the base of the hill. The interior of the cave was a world of shadows and silence, a stark, cold contrast to the sun-scorched earth outside. The last sliver of daylight painted a thin, dusty gold line across the sandy floor, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the still air. It was into this dim, sepulchral space that Outback cautiously padded, his nose working overtime, analyzing the complex, alarming bouquet of scents that filled the cramped space. The primary scent was Alexis, but it was a version of her he had never encountered. It was a scent of decay and extremity. The coppery tang of blood was strong, emanating from her torn, blistered feet and the deep, angry scratches on her arms and face from battling through unforgiving scrub. Underneath that was the sickly sweet, cloying odor of infection, likely from a wound that had been festering for days in the filthy, hot conditions. But the most overpowering scent was one of profound, systemic collapse, the acrid smell of a body consuming its own muscle for fuel, the strange, almost chemical odor of severe dehydration, and the flat, cold scent of a metabolism slowing to a near standstill. She was curled in a fetal position against the far wall of the shallow cave, her body tucked into the deepest pocket of shadow as if trying to escape the very fact of its own existence. Her once-chic clothes were now rags, stained with red dust, sweat, and dark, dried patches of blood. Her skin, where it wasn't caked in grime, was pale and waxy, stretched taut over the sharp bones of her face. Her lips were cracked and bleeding. Her breathing was so shallow and infrequent that it was barely perceptible, only the faint, almost imperceptible rise and fall of her chest betrayed the flicker of life still clinging to her. Outback approached slowly, his head low, his body language a mixture of canine curiosity and innate caution. He whined softly, a low, questioning sound in the back of his throat. He sniffed at her outstretched hand, the fingers curled like pale, brittle claws. The scent that rose from her was a story of utter defeat, a narrative of suffering that even his simple understanding could grasp. This was not the vibrant, threatening creature whose scent he knew. This was something broken, a husk. Outside, the voices of the search party grew louder, accompanied by the crunch of boots on gravel and the beam of a powerful flashlight cutting swathes through the darkness. The light swept across the cave entrance, momentarily blinding, before pinning the two figures in its stark, white glare, the motionless, crumpled form of Alexis and the vigilant, watchful dog standing guard over her. For a long, suspended moment, there was silence as the humans took in the scene. It was a tableau of both salvation and damnation. They had found her. She was alive. But the cost of that survival was written brutally across her broken body. Then, chaos erupted. Orders were barked into radios. A medical kit was rushed forward. Gentle but firm hands moved Outback aside as a paramedic knelt beside Alexis, his fingers searching for a pulse at her neck. The sudden flurry of activity, the invasion of this silent tomb by noise and light, seemed to rouse her from the depths of her stupor. Her eyelids, crusted and heavy, fluttered open. The world that swam into her blurred vision was a confusion of shadows and blinding light. The first thing she registered was not the human faces, not the voices, but a dark, furry shape hovering at the periphery. A dog. A memory, fragmented and distorted by delirium, surfaced in her mind. A chase. Fear. A barking that had been a constant, terrifying soundtrack to her flight. In her fever dream state, the lines between reality and nightmare blurred. The dog that had just led her rescuers to her, the dog that was now simply watching, was transformed in her fractured perception into the embodiment of her persecution. A raw, guttural sound, more animal than human, tore from her parched throat. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated terror. Her body, which moments before had been on the brink of shutdown, convulsed with a final, desperate surge of adrenaline. "No, get away," she croaked, her voice a dry, papery rustle. She tried to shrink back, to press herself deeper into the unyielding stone, her wide, terrified eyes fixed not on the paramedic trying to soothe her, but on Outback. The barking, always the barking, following me. Her mind, stripped bare by exhaustion, thirst, and pain, was replaying the auditory torment of her flight. The sound of a distant dingo pack howling in the night had merged with the memory of Outback's initial, excited barks when the trail was fresh. In her psychosis, it had become a single, relentless pursuit, a canine specter that had hounded her every step, driving her deeper into the desert, its barking a promise of impending doom. And now, here it was, in the flesh, in her final sanctuary. Her cellar, her tomb, had been found. And the thing that had found her, the instrument of her end, was the very beast whose barking had haunted her descent into hell. She began to tremble violently, her breath coming in short, ragged gasps that threatened to tip over into hyperventilation. "Stop it, make it stop," she pleaded, her gaze still locked on the confused shepherd. The paramedic tried to block her view, to calm her, but her terror was absolute, a primal, unreasoning fear that transcended the reality of her rescue. It was a cruel, ironic twist. The creature that had been her salvation, the key that had unlocked the door of her rocky prison, was, in her eyes, the very architect of her captivity. The barks that had been a beacon of hope for the search party had been a death knell for her. In that moment, as she was gently lifted onto a stretcher, her body safely in human hands, her mind remained trapped in the desert, listening to the echo of a dog's bark, a sound she would likely associate with the deepest circle of her own personal inferno for the rest of her days. The Outback had barked, and Alexis, from the depths of her cellar, had listened, and in listening, had been utterly broken. In the dimly lit living room of the Quartermaine mansion, the tension between Michael Corinthos and Willow Tate reached its boiling point. The air felt heavy with accusation and disappointment as Willow's voice trembled, her eyes glistening with restrained tears. "You set me up, didn't you, Michael?" she demanded, her tone caught somewhere between disbelief and fury. Michael's jaw tightened as he ran a hand through his hair, exhaling in frustration. "Willow, it's not like that. I didn't set you up. I was trying to protect you," he insisted, his voice firm but weary. Willow shook her head, the hurt etched deep into her expression. "Protect me? By keeping secrets and manipulating everything behind my back? That's not protection, Michael, that's control. Her words hit him harder than he expected. He took a cautious step forward, but she instinctively moved back, creating an invisible wall between them that neither knew how to break anymore. Michael had always prided himself on being the rational one, the fixer, the problem solver. But lately, everything he touched seemed to fall apart. His mother's constant scheming, his father's endless war with Sonny's enemies, and now, his marriage to Willow crumbling beneath the weight of mistrust. I didn't mean for it to look that way, he said softly, his voice cracking just slightly. Everything I did for our family. For Wiley. For you. Willow crossed her arms, her chin trembling as she fought to keep her composure. If you really did it for me, you would have trusted me enough to tell me the truth. Her tone softened at the end, but her eyes were still fierce, searching his face for any flicker of remorse. You say you love me, Michael, but love doesn't come with lies and manipulation. He stepped closer again, desperate to make her see the pain in his eyes. I know I messed up. I should have told you. But after everything we've been through, Nina, the lies, the courtroom battles, I just wanted to keep us safe. I didn't want to risk losing you again. Willow looked down, her voice barely above a whisper. You already did. Across town, at Alexis Davis's house, the night was far from quiet. The faint sound of barking echoed from the back of the property, sharp and insistent. Outback, what's gotten into you? Alexis muttered, grabbing her sweater as she hurried toward the cellar door. The old Labrador mix was normally calm, but tonight he was pacing and barking like something, or someone, was down there. Alexis fumbled with her flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness as she descended the creaky wooden steps into the cellar. If this is just a raccoon again, I swear, she began, her words trailing off as the barking grew louder. The dog stood rigid near the far corner, his tail down, teeth bared slightly. Outback, heel, she commanded, but even she could feel the hair on the back of her neck rise. The flashlight beam caught a glimpse of something, a glint of metal, maybe, and her pulse quickened. Okay, she whispered to herself, definitely not a raccoon. She reached for her phone and called Gregory, her voice hushed but tense. Gregory, it's me. Can you come by? Something's not right in the cellar. Gregory's voice on the other end was filled with concern. Alexis, are you safe? Do you want me to call the police? She hesitated, glancing at Outback, who continued to growl. Not yet. Just hurry, please. When she hung up, she noticed something she hadn't before, the faint outline of disturbed dirt near the wall. She swallowed hard, her mind spinning. What in the world, she whispered, crouching to get a closer look. Outback moved beside her, still tense but protective. Alexis reached out, brushing away a layer of dust and debris, revealing what looked like the edge of a small metal box. Oh, my God, she murmured, heart pounding. What have you found, boy? Meanwhile, back at the Quartermaine estate, the emotional storm between Michael and Willow raged on. You've been keeping things from me for weeks, Willow said, pacing back and forth. I kept asking why you were so secretive, and you always had an excuse. I thought we were a team, Michael. He took a deep breath, guilt washing over him. We are a team, Willow. But sometimes I don't know how to protect you without screwing everything up. She gave him a bitter look. That's not protection. That's you trying to play hero. The silence between them lingered before she finally added, I can't keep doing this. Every time I think we're past the lies, something else blows up in my face. Michael turned away, his voice barely audible. I thought I was doing the right thing. Willow's voice softened, her anger now tangled with exhaustion. Then maybe you need to start asking yourself what right really means. Because this isn't it. She rubbed her temples, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. You know what hurts the most? I believed in you. I defended you when everyone said you were turning into your father. I said, no, Michael's different. He doesn't lie. He doesn't manipulate. Michael's head snapped up, guilt etched into every feature. Don't say that. I'm not Sonny. She looked at him long and hard. Then stop acting like him. In the cellar, Gregory finally arrived, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as Alexis pointed toward the corner. There, she said, her voice tight. Outback's been barking nonstop since I came home. Gregory crouched down beside her, studying the disturbed dirt. Looks like someone's been digging. Alexis nodded, the unease in her stomach growing heavier. That's what I thought. And look. She gestured toward the small metal box now half exposed. Gregory brushed more dirt away, revealing its rusted edges. It's old, he murmured, but someone recently moved it. Alexis exhaled slowly. I swear, if this turns out to be another one of Julian's secrets, I'm selling this house. Gregory chuckled nervously but didn't disagree. When he finally pried open the box, both of them leaned in and froze. Inside were papers, old photos, and what looked like a key wrapped in a faded handkerchief. What the hell? Alexis whispered. Gregory picked up one of the papers, his eyes widening as he read. This is... Alexis, these are letters addressed to you. Her eyes widened in shock. That's impossible. From who? Gregory hesitated before handing her one of the envelopes. It's from Neil. Alexis stared at the handwriting, her heart skipping a beat. Neil Byrne? She asked, her voice trembling. But he's gone, Gregory finished softly. Yeah. But it looks like he left something behind. Alexis sank to her knees, clutching the letter to her chest. Why would he hide this down here? She whispered. Outback whined softly beside her, sensing her distress. Gregory put a comforting hand on her shoulder. There's only one way to find out. She nodded slowly, still too stunned to speak.